Admiral stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship, the Eternal Dawn. Through the massive window, she watched the distant stars burn like cold fires in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, her people were dying. Somewhere out there, the enemy was coming. The war had lasted 17 years. 17 years of blood and fire and defeat. The Dominion had swept across the galaxy like a disease, consuming everything in their path. World after world had fallen. Species after species had been wiped out or enslaved. The Galactic Coalition, an alliance of 12 different alien races, had fought back with everything they had. It was not enough. It was never enough. Tentacles curled tight against her body as she remembered the reports from this morning. 3 more colony worlds had gone silent. 2 battle fleets had been destroyed. The outer territories were lost. Now the coalition was pulling back to the core worlds, abandoning billions of civilians to the mercy of an enemy that had no mercy at all. She was tired, so very tired. Her purple skin had grown pale over the years and the glow in her 4 eyes had dimmed. She had been fighting this war since she was young. Now she felt ancient. The door behind her slid open with a soft hiss. She did not turn around. She already knew who it was. "Admiral," Lieutenant said quietly. His voice was nervous, as it always was these days. "High Command has sent new orders." "Let me guess," replied, still watching the stars. "We are to fall back again. We are to abandon more worlds again. We are to tell our people that help is coming, even though we know it is not." Was silent for a moment. He was a species known for their honesty. They could not lie, even when lies would be kinder. "Yes, Admiral, all of that, but there is something else." Finally turned to face him. Stood in the doorway, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. His blue scales had gone pale, almost white. She had never seen him look so frightened. "Our deep space sensors picked up something," he said. "A fleet. A massive fleet moving toward Coalition space from the edge of the galaxy." Felt her hearts beat faster. "Reinforcements, are they flanking us?" "No, Admiral, that is the strange part." Stepped forward and handed her a data pad. "The signal does not match signatures. It does not match any coalition species either. We have checked our entire database. There is no record of this signal anywhere." Looked at the data pad. The numbers made no sense. The fleet was huge, bigger than anything she had ever seen. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands, and they were moving at speeds that should have been impossible. "Unknown," she whispered. "After all these years of war, all these years of death, something unknown appears at our doorstep." "It could be a new enemy," said. "Another threat we will have to face. Or it could be salvation." Did not believe her own words, but she said them anyway. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made people weak. But without it, what was left? "There is more," continued. "I did some research into the old archives. The very old archives from before the coalition was formed. I found something strange." Raised an eyebrow ridge. "What did you find?" 1,000 years ago, explorers from the people discovered a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. The inhabitants were primitive. They had barely figured out how to leave their own atmosphere, but found them disturbing. "Disturbing how?" Shifted uncomfortably. "The species was violent, aggressive. They fought wars constantly, killing each other over territory, resources, even ideas. The observers believed they would destroy themselves within a few centuries, so the council made a decision." "What decision?" "They quarantined the solar system, sealed all records, put up warning beacons to keep everyone away, and then they forgot about them." Paused. "The species was called human. Their planet was called Earth." Felt a chill run through her body. "And you think this unknown fleet might be?" "I do not know, Admiral. The quarantine beacons went silent centuries ago. No one has checked on that system since. For all we know, the humans did destroy themselves just as the predicted." Shook his head. "But if they did not?" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. walked past him, moving toward the command center. Her mind was racing. 1,000 years of isolation, 1,000 years of silence. And now, at the darkest moment in Coalition history, something was coming from the direction of that forgotten world. The command center was busy when she arrived. Officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, monitoring the war, tracking enemy movements, coordinating the endless retreat. They all looked up when entered. They all saw the strange expression on her face. "Put the unknown fleet on the main display," she ordered. The tactical hologram flickered and changed. The familiar red markers of ships disappeared, replaced by a massive cluster of blue signals moving through empty space. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. Each individual signal was larger than anything in the Coalition fleet, and there were thousands of them. "How long until they reach us?" asked. "At their current speed, 3 standard cycles," the navigation officer replied. "But Admiral, that speed should not be possible. Our fastest ships could not match it." "Clearly, our fastest ships are not as fast as we thought." Stared at the display. 3 cycles. 3 cycles until everything changed for better or worse. 3 cycles until the unknown became known. "Admiral," said quietly, stepping up beside her, "what do we do?" Was silent for a long moment. Around her the command center had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. They were looking to her for answers, for guidance, for hope. She had none to give. She had only questions. Who were these newcomers? Why were they coming? Were they friends or enemies? Would they save the Coalition or destroy it? And if they were human, if they had survived 1,000 years of isolation and war against themselves, what kind of species would they have become? "We wait," finally said. "We watch, and we prepare for anything." She turned to face her crew. These brave souls who had followed her through 17 years of hell. These officers who had lost friends, families, entire worlds. They deserved the truth. "I will not lie to you," she said. "I do not know what is coming. It could be our salvation. It could be our doom. But after 17 years of fighting an enemy we cannot beat, I welcome the unknown, because the known has brought us nothing but defeat." She pointed at the blue signals on the display. "Whatever that is, whatever those ships carry, they are coming whether we want them to or not. So we will meet them with our heads held high. We will meet them as the Coalition has met every challenge, together." The command center erupted in quiet murmurs. Some officers looked hopeful, others looked terrified, but they all straightened their backs and returned to their stations. They all prepared for what was to come. Turned back to the display. The unknown fleet continued its approach, silent and unstoppable. 3 cycles. 3 cycles, until the universe changed forever. She did not know if she should pray for salvation or brace for destruction, so she did both. The ancient archives of the people were buried deep beneath the surface of their massive stone halls stretched for miles underground, filled with crystal data cores that held the memories of a civilization 10,000 years old. No one had walked these halls in centuries. No one had reason to. Until now. Elder Council moved slowly through the dusty corridors. She was old, even by standards. Her silver skin had grown thin and fragile. Her 6 legs trembled with each step. But her mind was still sharp, and when the Coalition had asked her to search the archives for information about the unknown fleet, she had not hesitated. She had been searching for 2 days now. 2 days of reading through records that had not been touched in 1,000 years. 2 days of discovering secrets that her people had buried and forgotten. What she found terrified her. The chamber she entered now was small and circular. A single crystal core stood in the center, glowing with a faint blue light. The inscription above it read, "Earth Survey, Cycle 3247. Classification, sealed. Access, forbidden." Placed her hand on the crystal. It hummed beneath her touch, and then images began to flood her mind. She saw a small blue planet orbiting a yellow sun, beautiful, peaceful from a distance. But as the images drew closer, she saw the truth. Cities burning, armies clashing, weapons that could destroy entire regions being unleashed without hesitation. The inhabitants of this world were at war with themselves, and they had been at war for as long as anyone could remember. The observers had watched from orbit, recording everything. They had studied the humans for 50 years before making their report. Read the words that appeared in her mind. The language was ancient, but she understood it clearly. The species known as human presents a unique psychological profile. They are highly intelligent, capable of great creativity and problem-solving. They form strong social bonds and show remarkable loyalty to their chosen groups. However, they are also intensely aggressive. They fight wars over territory, resources, ideology, and sometimes for no reason at all. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their own civilization multiple times over. It is the opinion of this survey team that humanity will not survive another 500 years. They will destroy themselves long before they develop the technology to leave their solar system. Move to the next section of the report. Her hearts were beating fast now. Recommendation: quarantine the human solar system. Establish warning beacons to prevent contact. Seal all records of this survey. Allow humanity to develop naturally or to destroy themselves as predicted. Under no circumstances should contact be made. The psychological profile of this species makes them too dangerous to integrate into the galactic community. If they somehow survive and develop faster than light travel, reassess the situation at that time. The recommendation had been approved. The quarantine had been established, and then the had walked away and never looked back. Pulled her hand from the crystal, she was shaking. 1,000 years. They had left humanity alone for 1,000 years. They had assumed the humans would kill themselves. They had assumed the problem would solve itself. But the unknown fleet approaching coalition space suggested otherwise. Contacted Admiral immediately. The communication was encrypted, sent through channels that even the could not intercept. When face appeared on the screen, she looked exhausted. The war was taking everything from her. Elders said, "What have you found?" Told her everything. The survey, the quarantine, the prediction that humanity would destroy itself. When she finished, was silent for a long moment. "They were wrong," finally said. "The humans did not destroy themselves." "It appears not," hesitated. "Admiral, there is more. I have been studying human history as recorded by our observers. I need you to understand what kind of species we may be dealing with." "Tell me." Took a deep breath. In the 50 years our observers watched Earth, the humans fought 3 major wars. Millions of their people died. They used weapons of terrible power against each other. Cities were flattened. Entire regions were poisoned with radiation. And yet after each war they rebuilt. They did not just survive. They came back stronger. Leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that humans do not give up, ever." Our observers noted this again and again. When humans face disaster, they do not accept defeat. They fight harder, they push further, they turn their pain into fuel. Paused. If they have spent the last 1,000 years alone, fighting only each other, I cannot imagine what they have become. "Could they be friendly?" asked. "Could they be coming to help us?" "I do not know. The psychological profile suggests they are capable of great compassion as well as great violence. They form strong attachments to those they consider family, and they will fight to the death to protect them." Shook her head. "But we are not their family. We are strangers who abandoned them. Who knows how they will react to us?" Rubbed her eyes with her tentacles. This was supposed to be simple. Unknown fleet approaches. We identify them. We respond accordingly. Now you are telling me we are about to meet a species that was deliberately forgotten because our ancestors thought they were too dangerous. "Yes, Admiral, that is exactly what I am telling you." "And if they are hostile, if they see us as enemies?" Did not answer. She did not need to. They both knew the truth. The coalition was barely surviving the. If the humans decided to attack as well, there would be nothing left to save. "There is one more thing," said quietly. "The last entry in the survey records, a personal note from the lead observer. She wrote it just before the quarantine was established." "What does it say?" Closed her eyes and recited from memory. "I have watched these humans for 50 years. I have seen them at their worst and their best. They are capable of terrible cruelty and incredible kindness. They build beautiful things and then destroy them. They love deeply and hate deeply. They are a contradiction wrapped in flesh. But there is one thing I know for certain. If humanity survives long enough to reach the stars, they will change everything. For better or worse, the galaxy will never be the same." Was quiet for a long time after that. "Thank you, Elder," she finally said. "You have given me much to think about." "Admiral, whatever happens next, I want you to know something." Leaned closer to the screen. "My ancestors made a choice 1,000 years ago. They chose fear. They chose to hide from humanity rather than face them. I do not think that was the right choice." "What would you have done differently?" Smiled sadly. "I would have talked to them. I would have tried to understand them. Because species that survive as much as humanity has survived do not do so by accident. They do it because there is something special about them, something worth knowing." The communication ended. Sat alone in the ancient archive, surrounded by the memories of 1,000 years. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was still approaching. In 2 cycles, they would arrive. In 2 cycles, the galaxy would learn whether humanity had become monsters or something else entirely. Hope for the best. But she prepared for the worst. The Armada had surrounded the last stronghold of the coalition. 200 warships formed a wall of death around Prime, the most important world left in coalition space. Behind them waited the troop transports, carrying millions of soldiers ready to land and begin the final slaughter. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and watched the enemy close in. Her ship was part of a defense fleet of 40 vessels, 40 against 200. Everyone knew how this would end. "Admiral," Lieutenant said, his voice hollow, "the Supreme Commander is hailing us. He wishes to discuss surrender terms." Almost laughed. They did not take prisoners. They did not accept surrender. When they won a battle, they killed everyone. The Supreme Commander was just being cruel, offering false hope before the slaughter. "Ignore him," she said. "All ships prepare for final engagement. We will take as many of them with us as we can." Around her, the bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency. They had accepted their fate. They would die today, but they would die fighting. That was all they could do. And then everything changed. The sensor officer screamed, not in fear but in shock. "Admiral, new contacts, massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system." Spun toward the tactical display. What she saw made her heart stop. Space itself seemed to tear open. Brilliant white rifts appeared across the darkness, growing larger and larger, and from those rifts emerged ships. Hundreds of ships, thousands of ships, ships so large they made the warships look like toys. The unknown fleet had arrived. "That signal," whispered, staring at his console. "Admiral, that signal is not ours." "I know," replied, unable to look away from the display. "It is humans arriving," looked up at her with wide eyes. "Prepare for impact." But the human fleet did not attack. Instead, they positioned themselves between the coalition and the, forming a wall of metal and firepower that blocked the enemy advance. They moved with perfect coordination, thousands of ships acting as one. And then a transmission cut through every channel. Every screen on every ship, coalition and alike, flickered and displayed the same image. A human face. Studied him carefully. He looked young by coalition standards, though she knew humans aged differently. His skin was a warm brown color, and his dark eyes held a cold fire that made her uncomfortable. He wore a black uniform decorated with golden symbols she did not recognize. His expression was calm, controlled, but there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. When he spoke, his voice filled the bridge. "This is Grand Admiral Park of the United Earth Navy. We received your distress signals 70 years ago. It took us a while to get here." He paused, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward in something that might have been a smile. "Sorry for the delay." Felt her tentacles go limp. 70 years. They had been calling for help for 70 years, and finally, impossibly, someone had answered. But the human was not finished. "To the Dominion," he continued, his voice growing harder. "We have been watching you for some time. We have seen what you do to the species you conquer. We have seen the burned worlds, the mass graves, the slave camps." His eyes seemed to glow with cold fury. "You have attacked species under Earth's protection. You have 72 seconds to surrender unconditionally." He leaned forward slightly, and his next words were soft, almost gentle. "I suggest you do not waste them." The Supreme Commander responded immediately. A barrage of weapons fire erupted from the flagship, streaking toward the human fleet. Missiles and energy beams and projectiles of every kind filled the void. Admiral did not move. He did not even blink. The weapons struck the human ships and vanished. Energy shields that glowed like blue stars absorbed everything that threw at them. Not a single ship was damaged. Not a single shield flickered. 72 seconds it is, said. His calm never wavered. "All ships engage." The human fleet opened fire. Had seen many battles in her 17 years of war. She had witnessed destruction on a scale that would haunt her nightmares forever, but she had never seen anything like this. Human weapons did not just damage the ships, they erased them. Beams of pure white energy cut through warships like they were made of paper. Missiles detonated with the force of small suns, consuming everything within 1,000 kilometers. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were reduced to expanding clouds of debris in seconds. And the humans did not stop. They pressed forward, their fleet splitting into dozens of smaller groups that surrounded and destroyed ships with mechanical efficiency. There was no hesitation, no mercy, no pause to accept surrender. They tried to fight back. They were the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had never lost a battle. They were losing now. Within 5 minutes, half the armada was gone. Within 8 minutes, the survivors were trying to retreat. The human fleet let them run for exactly 3 seconds before cutting off their escape routes and finishing them off. The last warship exploded 11 minutes after the battle began. 200 ships, 11 minutes. The greatest military force in the galaxy, destroyed in less time than it took to eat breakfast. Admiral appeared on screen again. Behind him, his bridge crew was celebrating, but his expression remained controlled, professional. Only his eyes betrayed any emotion, and what saw there was not joy. It was satisfaction. The cold, quiet satisfaction of a predator that had caught its prey. "Coalition Admiral," he said, addressing directly. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. However, our intelligence suggests this was only a fraction of the military." Found her voice. How did you?" His expression softened slightly. "We have been preparing for this moment for a very long time, Admiral. Our ancestors were left alone in the dark. They spent centuries fighting each other, nearly destroying themselves more than once, but they survived, and they used that time to build." He gestured at the fleet behind him. "This is what 1,000 years of survival looks like." "Why?" asked. "Why did you come? Why do you care what happens to us?" Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost human. "Because we spent 1,000 years wondering if anyone else was out there, hoping we were not alone, fearing we were." He met her eyes through the screen. "When we finally left our solar system and found your distress signals, we knew we had a choice. We could ignore them, stay safe in our own territory, protect only ourselves. But you did not." No, shook his head. We could not, because we know what it feels like to be alone and afraid, and we refused to let anyone else feel that way if we could help it. Felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that comes from having no other option. This was hope born from something stronger. What happens now? She asked. Smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and genuine. Now, Admiral, we hunt. They have been terrorizing this galaxy long enough. It is time someone stopped them. His eyes hardened again. And we have been waiting a very long time for an enemy worth fighting. The communication ended. Stood on her bridge, surrounded by her stunned crew, and watched the human fleet reform into attack formation. The war was not over, but for the first time in 17 years, they were not losing. For the first time in 17 years, they had a chance. The war changed after the humans arrived. Everything changed. Admiral had been assigned as a liaison officer aboard the human flagship, the UEN Indomitable. Her mission was simple: observe, learn, and report back to Coalition High Command. What she witnessed in those first weeks would stay with her forever. The human fleet moved through space like a force of nature. They did not just fight battles. They won them completely. World after world was liberated. Enemy fleets that had seemed invincible were crushed without mercy. The Dominion, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was being torn apart. But it was not the human technology that amazed. It was the humans themselves. She spent her first day aboard the Indomitable simply watching. The ship was massive, larger than any vessel she had ever seen. It carried a crew of 12,000, all of them human. They moved through the corridors with purpose and energy, talking and laughing and arguing with each other. They seemed so alive. Captain Han was her primary contact. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a quick smile. Her black hair was cut short, practical for military service. She treated with respect, but also with a caution that suggested she was still deciding whether to trust her. "You seem surprised," said on that first day, watching observe the crew. "What were you expecting?" "I do not know," admitted. "The ancient records described your species as violent, aggressive, dangerous." Laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine and unforced. "We are all of those things, but we are also more than that." She gestured at the crew members passing by. "See them, engineers, scientists, soldiers, doctors. Each one of them chose to be here, chose to leave Earth and fight a war against an enemy they had never met, to protect species they had never seen." "Why would they do that?" "Because it was the right thing to do," shrugged. "Humans are complicated. We can be cruel and kind, selfish and generous, destructive and creative, sometimes all at once." She looked it seriously. "But when we see someone being hurt, someone being bullied, something in us cannot walk away." Thought about that for a long time. Over the next few weeks, she learned more about human history. Was patient, answering her endless questions about Earth, about the 1,000 years of isolation, about everything that had happened. "We almost destroyed ourselves," explained one evening. They were sitting in the observation lounge, watching stars drift by outside the massive windows. Multiple times. Nuclear wars, climate disasters, plagues that killed billions. Every time we thought we had learned our lesson, we found new ways to hurt each other. "How did you survive?" "Stubbornness," smiled faintly. "Humans do not know how to give up. Even when everything seems hopeless, even when logic says we should surrender, something in us keeps fighting. Some people call it foolishness. Others call it courage. I think it is just who we are." "And the wars, the violence?" "Still there," was honest about it. "We stopped fighting each other about 300 years ago, unified under one government, but the instincts did not go away. We just pointed them outward instead of inward." She looked at. "When we left our solar system and found out what they had been doing, it was almost a relief." A relief. Finally, an enemy we could fight without guilt. Finally, someone who deserved everything we could throw at them. Eyes hardened. The burned worlds enslaved entire species, committed crimes that would make your worst nightmares look pleasant. When we found the evidence, we did not debate what to do. We did not hold councils or discuss diplomacy. She paused. We built ships, we trained soldiers, and we came. Saw the truth of those words in the battles that followed. The human fleet engaged thee at a place called the Caries Nebula. 300 warships had gathered there, the largest force they had assembled since the war began. They were preparing for a counterattack, planning to push back against the human advance. They never got the chance. The humans hit them from 3 directions at once. Their ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible, thousands of vessels acting as one organism. The battle lasted 16 minutes. When it was over, not a single ship remained. Watched from the Indomitable's command center. The human officers around her were calm, professional, treating the destruction of 300 warships like routine work. But she noticed something else too. She noticed the names painted on the human ships. Vengeance, retribution. Remember Seoul, Tokyo's answer, never again. What do those names mean? She asked. Was quiet for a moment. They are reminders of the times we failed, the cities we destroyed in our own wars, the mistakes we made. She looked at the display where the last ship was breaking apart. We name our ships after our sins so we never forget what we are capable of, and we use those ships to make sure no one else suffers the way we made each other suffer. That seems heavy. It is. Turn to face her. Humans carry their history with them, every victory, every defeat, every mistake. We do not forget, we cannot forget. It is both our greatest strength and our greatest burden. The war continued. Months passed. The humans pushed deeper into territory, liberating world after world. Traveled with them, watching, learning, trying to understand these strange beings who had emerged from isolation to save a galaxy that had abandoned them. She saw human soldiers risk their lives to evacuate alien civilians from war zones. She saw human doctors working around the clock to heal species they had never encountered before. She saw human engineers rebuilding infrastructure on worlds that had been under occupation for decades. But she also saw the other side, the cold efficiency with which they destroyed enemy forces, the complete lack of mercy shown to soldiers who tried to surrender, the grim satisfaction on human faces when another enemy fleet was annihilated. "You do not take prisoners," she said to one day. No, did not apologize. They never took prisoners either. They killed every population they conquered except for the ones they kept as slaves. We found the camps. We saw what they did. Her voice was flat, controlled. So no, we do not take prisoners, not from them. Is that not cruel? Looked at her for a long moment. Perhaps, but cruelty has a purpose sometimes. They built their empire on fear. They believed no one would ever fight back, that everyone would simply surrender rather than face their wrath. She shook her head. We are teaching them a different lesson. We are teaching them that some species do not surrender, some species fight back, and some species, when pushed, become something they never imagined. What is that? Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Worse than they are. Thought about that for a long time afterward. She thought about what it meant to be human, to carry so much history, so much pain, so much anger, and yet to still reach out to strangers, to still fight for people who had done nothing for them. The humans were terrifying. They were also the only reason the coalition still existed. And somewhere in that contradiction, thought, lay the truth of who they really were. The war ended on a cold morning, aboard the UN Indomitable. Admiral stood beside Grand Admiral Park on the command deck, watching the transmission that would change everything. The High Council, the ruling body that had directed the Dominion's conquest for centuries, was surrendering. The image on screen showed 7 elders, their skin sagging with age, their black eyes empty of the pride that had defined their species. Behind them, through the windows of their palace, human ships filled the sky above there. "We accept your terms," the eldest said. His voice was broken, defeated. "The Dominion surrenders unconditionally." Nodded once. "Your military forces will stand down immediately. Your occupied worlds will be returned to their original inhabitants. Your leaders will face trial for crimes against sentient life." He paused. "These terms are not negotiable." "We understand." The transmission ended. Around the command deck, human officers were quiet. There was no celebration, no cheering, just grim satisfaction that a long job was finally done. "Looked at, you do not seem happy." "War is not something to be happy about," he replied, "even when you win." He turned to face her. Millions of lives were lost. Dozens of worlds were damaged beyond repair. Species were pushed to the edge of extinction. He shook his head. "Victory does not change any of that." "But you stopped them. You saved the coalition." "We did what needed to be done, nothing more." In the months that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The Dominion was dismantled. Occupied worlds were liberated. Refugees were returned to their homes. The coalition, which had been on the edge of destruction, started to rebuild. And humanity took its place among the stars. The formal ceremony was held on Prime, the world that had almost been humanity's first contact with the coalition. Representatives from all 12 coalition species gathered in the Great Hall of Unity. For the first time in 1,000 years, humans walked among them. Watched the proceedings from her seat near the front. The human delegation was led by Grand Admiral, accompanied by Captain, and several other officers she had come to know during the war. They wore their dress uniforms, black and gold, standing out against the colorful robes of the alien representatives. The coalition chancellor, an ancient named, rose to speak. 1,000 years ago," he began, his voice echoing through the hall, "our ancestors made a decision. They found a species at the edge of the galaxy, a young species still learning to walk among the stars, and they chose fear. They quarantined that species, isolated them, left them alone in the dark." He paused. "We told ourselves we were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. In truth, we were simply afraid of what we did not understand." He turned to face the human delegation. "For 1,000 years, humanity survived alone. They fought wars against themselves. They nearly destroyed their own world multiple times. And yet they endured, they grew stronger. They reached the stars not with our help but despite our absence." Bowed his head. "And when they finally found us, when they saw us being slaughtered by an enemy we could not defeat, they did not turn away. They did not seek revenge for our abandonment. They came to help." The hall was silent. Every eye was on the humans. "The coalition owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid," continued. "But we can start by doing what our ancestors should have done 1,000 years ago. We can welcome them as equals, as partners, as family." He extended his hand toward. "On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I invite the United Earth to take its place among us. Not as newcomers, not as outsiders, but as the brothers and sisters we should have recognized long ago." Stepped forward. For a moment he simply looked at its extended hand. Then he reached out and took it. The hall erupted in applause. Representatives from a dozen species rose to their feet, clapping and cheering and making sounds of celebration in their own ways. The isolation of humanity was over. The galaxy was whole again. Found herself crying. She did not know why. Perhaps it was relief that the war was over. Perhaps it was joy that something good had finally come from so much suffering. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Later that evening, she found standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The celebrations continued behind them, music and laughter spilling out into the night. But the Grand Admiral seemed lost in thought. "You look troubled," said, joining him at the railing. Smiled faintly. "I am thinking about the future, about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "Humanity spent 1,000 years preparing for war, building ships, training soldiers, developing weapons that could destroy worlds." He looked up at the stars. Now the war is over, they are defeated, the galaxy is at peace. He paused. What do we do with all that preparation? What do we do with all that anger? Considered the question. You find something else to fight for. Like what? Like rebuilding what was destroyed, like helping species recover from centuries of occupation, like exploring the parts of the galaxy no one has ever seen. She turned to face him. Humanity's strength is not just in war. It is in your refusal to give up, your determination to keep going no matter what. That strength can build as well as destroy. Was quiet for a long moment, then he laughed softly. You know, when we first received the Coalition's distress signals, there was a debate. Some people wanted to ignore them, stay safe, protect our own territory and let the rest of the galaxy burn. What changed their minds? We showed them the records our scouts had gathered, the burned worlds, the mass graves, the slave camps. His voice hardened. And then we reminded them of our own history, the times we had been the ones burning worlds and digging graves and building camps. He shook his head. We could not stand by and watch others make the same mistakes we had made. It would have been like abandoning our own past. So you came to help strangers, because you remembered being the ones who needed help. Yes, turned to face her. Humanity is not kind because we are innocent. We are kind because we are guilty. We know what we are capable of. We know the darkness that lives inside us, and we spend every day fighting to be better than our worst impulses. Nodded slowly. She thought she finally understood. You asked me once what humanity wants, continued. I told you we wanted to make sure no one else ever felt as alone as we did. That is true, but there is more. What? We want to prove that we are more than our history, more than our wars and our violence and our mistakes. We want to prove that a species born in darkness can choose the light. He smiled, and for once it reached his eyes. We want to earn our place in the galaxy, not through conquest, through kindness. Stood beside him in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were already beginning the work of reconstruction. Engineers were rebuilding cities. Doctors were healing the wounded. Soldiers were standing guard over worlds that had known nothing but fear for generations. Humanity had arrived in fire, but they would stay in something gentler. The galaxy had spent 1,000 years forgetting about Earth. Now, finally, they would remember. And this time, they would remember hope.